All right, is everybody in place here? Who, we missing anybody? Okay, as we continue, we do have additional information that we will receive on preliminary school accreditation ratings as related to the SOL scores. So Sam will continue, and then after this discussion, we'll move on to our focus areas for this year. And again, one of the most important things, as I mentioned earlier, that we want to walk away with this afternoon, our goals for the year. Sam?
Okay. Chairman Houston, members of the board, as we continue, of course, I began with presenting data related to high stakes testing at the elementary, middle, and high school level. We should be aware that the research assessment and accountability team and department works very diligently to manually take a look at what could consist of predictions or projections, etc. Everything that you've heard this evening thus far and what you are going to hear related to results should be considered just that, preliminary and projections, and of course subject to change and will change. And so once that happens, then we will make the necessary adjustments. But what I am providing for you tonight centers on predictions as it relates to manual results around accreditation. Keep in mind that the state will make some changes. It also includes graduation, on-time graduation rates. You do realize that we have summer school sessions going on that could impact that. Students are successful during summer school, which also impacts typically our graduation rate in a positive manner. So keep that in mind, as well as what I refer to as the cleansing of data at the state level, where you have students that might or might not have been with us for what I refer to as a full academic year that would qualify them to be included in the results. So typically those students that have not been with us for a full academic year are removed from the results, which means that it potentially could result in a higher percentage of students meeting and exceeding standards, because typically those students that have not been with us for a full academic year do not perform as well as those that have been with us. So again, none of that is included in this, and that certainly will have an impact and could change the results. I would just draw your attention, of course, this is a work session and provided to you for your review beginning at this point through our regular session. So work sessions are for information to be provided for your review. And I ask that you review that, and as you have questions along individual levels, provide those to me or to appropriate designees. I will pinpoint from this projection that as we take a look at the graduation piece, we note that if you compare where we were with graduation, we see some positives in terms of on-time graduation as it relates to a comparison from year to year. So I would draw your attention to that, just pay close attention to that. So there are some successes there. Also, you will see that there are a couple of requests for conditional status, meaning that schools did improve from their current state, from their previous state to where they are now. And when that happens, you are required to submit a request to the state for conditional status, conditional accreditation status, and it is up to the state level to grant that or to deny it. So you see on those charts several of those requests. We determine internally, after we grew jointly and collaboratively, whether that type of request should be made. And when we determine those variables, it's based on whether improvements across subject areas were made. And I'll just draw attention to a couple of those. I won't go through each, but for example, if you take a look at Booker T. Washington High School, they showed improvement in English, reading, and math, and specifically in Algebra 1 as well. Also, their graduation completion index increased by what looks like 7% points. Again, that's what we see manually based on the calculation. So it looks as if they increased their graduation, on-time graduation rate by 7% points. And of course, again, summer graduation is continuing. Lake Taylor Middle showed improvement in most of their tested areas, even though they did not meet the state benchmark. So we mentioned earlier, we're starting at a certain baseline that's pretty low in many cases, and when that happens, although you make improvement, that doesn't necessarily mean that in that 1 year's period of time that you move to the absolute benchmark, but growth was experienced. And I also draw your attention to Tidewater Park, where they improved in all but 2 of the areas that were tested, with significant improvement in grade 5 English, also grade 4 and 5 math, and in grade 3 science. So this gives you an idea of a rough sketch of what has been projected or predicted as it relates to accreditation. We will eagerly await the state's information in terms of the official documentation of where we are. I'll end this piece by saying that overall, we saw an increase in the percentage of students meeting and exceeding standards across elementary, middle, and high school. That is the positive. And the challenge centers on the fact that we have much room to grow and to climb to get to our targets and our absolutes. I think that's a good segue into implications for this school year with goal setting.
Okay, we'll see if there are any questions.
Okay.
From what we received. Questions, comments?
With the request for the conditional status, in the past, wasn't that, isn't that something that that comes from the board? I thought that in past situations, you all just correct me, like you would write, that a letter would come from the board going to the state requesting conditional status for a particular school, and then it would spell out in that request, you know, whatever it was in previous years and in the previous year or years, and what it would be in the upcoming year, and then what the strategy would be.
Right, that's correct. With each one that we submit conditional requests for conditional status request around, with each that's marked at that level, the requirement is that you complete, based on indicators, the document just as you mentioned, and get and have sign off from the board chair. Dr. Williford, you want to talk about which schools and what that entailed? Or?
And let me add that quick.
Okay.
That typically, the submission for that doesn't happen by a formal board vote. I was aware of the interest in submitting based on those indicators, request for accreditation based on the results of it. So you're absolutely right, that typically, that comes under my signature. It's not something that we've done in the past, formal board vote.
I was anticipating that it was a vote, but so when did you all submit the request?
What was the date around that? Dr. Williford?
Final request was submitted August 1st. That was an initial request from the BDOE Office of School Improvement that we submit a request, requesting our intent by July 1st. So we met the initial intent on July 1st, and then we had to do a final request on August 1st. And so we submitted that August 1st, we met that deadline, and now we're waiting for a response from the VDOE.
So explain to me the process then, or the philosophy behind submitting the request but not letting the full board know about what the conditions were. I'm not sure, I don't
Well,
quite
actually,
follow
I
that.
did have that conversation with each of you that, because of the indication from the scores, that the superintendent was interested in submitting a request for conditional accreditation based on those results. I had that individual conversation with each of you, again, because it doesn't require a formal collective board vote. That is not the route that we took, and I did give authorization based on that to the superintendent to submit the request for that to the Virginia Department of Education.
I don't recall, but okay. So what, compared to what we had last year in terms of fully accredited warning and denied, can you give me a explanation or a description of where we stood last year and where we stand based upon this preliminary report today?
What I can say to you is that we can give you a rough projection or prediction around fully accredited this year compared to last year. And in terms of fully accredited, it seems to indicate a change in two less fully accredited this year than last year. Two less, yes. Now, understand that the other categories are pretty much a moving target because we have to wait and receive the information from the state in terms of what levels of accreditation. But as far as what we projected as fully accredited compared to last year, our projection centers on two less.
That is correct. That is correct.
I think I'm correct, yeah. And what I think I mentioned this, though we saw an increase in percentage of students meeting and exceeding, there were also some examples where the previous year, some schools made about a 3-year average. And once you make about a 3-year average, it makes it more difficult in the next year that if you have a low score across that 3-year average, then it's going to impact the bottom line this year. And so some of that has come into play here. But again, the only thing that we felt that we could be somewhat definitive around would be the number that was fully accredited.
And what are the numbers in parentheses indicating?
Those are the schools that had the reading waiver. So the 3 elementary schools listed, their science and social studies scores do not count in terms of their accreditation. So we put them in parentheses so you could see what they were, but those will not be factored into the state's accreditation rating for them. That was part of the reading waiver for Jay Cox, PB Young, and Tidewater Park Elementary.
Why do they have the waiver?
Because their reading scores had been low, so we requested the waiver over a year ago for 3rd grade, and so the 3rd grade science and social studies scores won't impact their accreditation.
So the process this year is different than years past. I just like to understand the difference. So typically, we would have received this type of report at a retreat and had the opportunity to get a full presentation and so forth. And then this year, we're getting it this way. Is there some reason why it's different this year than in years past?
When we held the retreat in the past, this kind of information wasn't ready in terms of being able to provide it in a way that it was going to be remotely close to what we thought it would be. And so during the retreat, if you recall, I provided information to the board, provided documents to the board around performance as we saw it at that point. It had not been whittled down to this point related to accreditation. And so,
I don't mean recent, I'm saying in the past. Like last year,
yeah.
I think the past couple of years it's been around July when we got the information. This past Saturday, I was over at public schools retreat, and they had this level of information, and then invited all the principals in, and had school by school information. So I'm just trying to understand why our city is so different than
Right, as far as, I don't call it the sequence is off with this particular piece in terms of predicting accreditation from last year. As I think back, it was around, am I right, Karen, on this? That we did this, right, that we did our preliminary, right, so that piece is not different for us in terms of that, so. And really, for me, providing it to you tonight was to try to get it to you as quickly as possible, so that it could give you even somewhat of a rough idea of what this entailed. And again, some of this can change, so.
Will you all share the letters that you submitted to the
Sure.
state?
Yeah, sure. Make copies of that. We can provide that.
And then Kate, Stella, and Lily wanted, it just says, to determine what are we thinking, I'm sorry, and Ruffner as well. What are we planning, or if that could be determined because it's been working for so many years in a row and.
Yeah, and we can say that Lindenwood showed improvement in almost all areas, specifically in grade 4 math. They met or exceeded the state benchmark in that area. However, again, as I, for fear of sounding redundant, we're starting at a certain point. The fact that they showed improvement in almost all areas, they still have a pretty steep climb. Though in grade 4 math, they met or exceeded the state benchmark. So that's to be determined based on that, yeah.
Another question, so you haven't tried to show, last year compared to this year, so I'm looking at, you mentioned when you were going out, we're looking at, Campus Stellar, and their, some of the figures that, I guess you could pull some of that from the report that we just got in terms of post-testing, but do you have a side-by-side chart so we can actually see? Maybe you can talk about, Campostella, yeah. Campostella is an area of concern for us in terms of directing the needs based on these results. I can say that they did show improvement in the past, even though they did not meet the state benchmark. But other areas are areas, along with that, there is a concern, and that's something that is part of our planning process as well as services and recertification. One of the things that I asked earlier, so we were talking earlier about running positive. So we're saying it's now the expectation that how will it take on the status of PPM, is that correct? I think that's what we're saying, right? So, so we requested, so does that mean that conditional studies requested for hot water is now null and void, we can take on whatever the official status is that we're given the status of warning based upon PPM?
That was not our approach. We requested a conditional accreditation for Tidewater based on the work that staff, the principal and the staff, has done to this point. And so although we are reconfiguring, we felt like that school, we should continue through the process, the accreditation process, and whatever whatever, I would say, rights or processes that we have available. We did not want that school to end this year with a possible denied accreditation when it could be conditionally accredited. We thought that that work would be warranted for that staff,
You're speaking of Tidewater.
Tidewater Park specifically.
Okay, so we're requesting the status change for closeout purposes, but no matter the response from VDOE, the ultimate status will be whatever it is for PB Young.
For PB Young, and I think we should note as well that in the request, part of the request deals with reconstitution or restructuring that school. So part of the intervention that or the restructuring that we're doing for Tidewater Park, by combining it with PB Young, that becomes part of that process as well.
May have a question later after the next piece of it.
Okay, all right. The next part of this piece deals with the goals for next year. The focus areas, main focus areas of the strategic plan, which will lead us into our discussion about the goals by which we will measure our work and progress as a governance leadership team this year.
All right, so in the next document, which is my last document that we have provided for the board, that hopefully will serve as a good springboard for your discussion, centers on the analysis of the data as you have seen it across elementary, middle, and high school, and across accreditation. And so the team has worked to analyze those results to determine where the strengths and weaknesses are and align these objectives, also the plans, the measurements, the baseline, the potential targets, and the absolutes to get movement around what the weak areas really reflected. So with this particular document that you should have, it has this appearance. So I'll pause and make it that you should have it.
And it's on the screen.
It's the same as the one that's on the screen.
I don't have that next data.
It is on Board Docs.
It should be on the board doc.
It
And
is.
is it under,
Goals and close this out.
Priorities and goals. Underneath the district update subgroups. We're teaching and learning.
That's your signal, I'll proceed.
Yeah, you go ahead, Will.
Did you find it?
All right, so again, what you're going to hear in reference to these goals center on the analysis of the results, the summative results that you've just experienced. Item number one, objective number one, speaks to common formative assessments. During our full day session, we took a look at best practices centered on research across urban systems that are known to assist with closing achievement gaps as long as implementation is done with fidelity. Centers on the frequency at which you give the formative assessments, and it really calls for a 4 to 8 weeks period of time. Every 4 to 8 weeks, assessments linked to what children should know and be able to do should be given. So in goal one, you see that it speaks to the elementary level, the elementary school level, and the common formative assessments being developed, valid and reliable, and given by the school division. So that is proposed to be done at the elementary level. And that second column It links it to what we already have in the strategic plan as far as the strategy and the plan, but it also spells out the additional commentary around what it means for us. So you see there that each elementary school will administer the common formative assessment during the middle of each quarter in the areas that you see there, those subject areas. And you see the schedule that's provided. And each assessment will, each result from that assessment will be uploaded and analyzed via the school data. So we'll be able to do what I refer to as a query tool and have the aggregate and disaggregate the data similar to what you saw this evening, but deeper because it will provide caseloads that will be student related and linked to their areas of deficiency so that the safety nets that schools provide for students will align with the areas of needs for those students. And you see that no later than 5 working days upon completion of administration. That next column is a column that centers on measurement. You see that we talk about the student results by grade level, and also the executive directors of the schools and principals will monitor disaggregating the data, similar to what you saw, but also down to the caseload, and turn that analysis into a plan for each individual student. That also will become an analysis that will be provided to the central level. It will also be an IndyStar. So that means that during our cabinet session, just as you saw the results posted today by level, at the cabinet level, we will be able to take a look at that same format, but we will be able to look at it by subject area, also by school, down to the student subgroup, down to the domain, so that we determine the implications for ongoing professional development as well. So those first several goals center on the frequency at which we give those common formative assessments. You notice the baselines are provided there based on what we see now. And again, this could change once we receive the final information from the state. We will update those figures in the baseline category. The target, you see that it speaks to a chart that's being attached here. So you have an attached chart that's in the back that shows you the targets and the absolute. Of course, the absolute for us, we discussed had to be 100% because we were working to see 100% of our students meet the target. But we meet the absolute target, that is, at 100%. But the interim target should be something that requires that we challenge the status quo, but it also should be attainable and measurable as we move forward. The goal number 2, I won't spend as much time on those categories, but you see that that's for each elementary school as well. But each elementary school will administer the CFAs developed by the school division. The first one speaks to that as well, but you see the subject areas across that particular category. The third goal speaks to the school division for administer 4 district level assessment with the pre-test and the post-test that we talked about earlier, and the team will provide some commentary on that as necessary. So the same concepts apply across those strategies, measurements, baselines, etc. That 4th item for in the form of an objective, the school division will provide targeted and high-quality professional learning to all certified elementary school employees, to include any long-term guest teachers. This targeted professional learning is based on the analysis of the results that you just viewed. Of course, you heard us talk about the fact that we saw some implications around history and science, et cetera, and some, as the team has been able to begin to go deeper, other implications too for professional learning, and that's driving the strategies, the measurements, the baselines here. So you see the preliminary, you see the targets. That 5th one, the school division will provide targeted and high quality professional learning to all certified middle. So we changed from elementary to middle as it relates now to professional development on number 5. Number 6, also professional learning, but now at the high, moving forward in terms of providing high quality professional learning to all certified employees, which has the implications for the effective teaching piece. The 7th one, the school division will implement and monitor and measure, document and publicize incremental progress on year 2 of the action plans, as we have begun to do quarterly. And all of these things are linked back to what the data is telling us right now. But as we receive formative data throughout, then we will make adjustments based on what that analysis tells us about how children are learning and at what level. 8 and 9 really center on the effective leader and the effective teacher. And at this point, we're having conversation around the school division, reviewing and implementing a scientifically research-based leadership model, school leadership model for the building level, to be able to model and analyze formative assessments to determine, number one, if the scope and sequence is actually being rolled out as it should, and is it informing us around what students should know and be able to do? And if not, what action should be taken to change that? But at this point, the difference in this year and last year, being able to give real-time commentary on what should change. That third piece centers on teacher effectiveness. The school division will review and implement and consider implementation of a scientifically research-based teacher effectiveness model. So that's teacher training, teacher and student results linked to that teacher training, but also principal as leaders, that particular training. So PD for teacher effectiveness, PD for the building level leader. Also the reliability and validity of CFAs based on the research out there that states that that should be done at least every 4 to 8 weeks, linked to the needs of children. And so those are major areas for us at this point. And so we're continuing that analysis as we go forward. And hopefully this will provide some additional information for you as you look at priorities moving forward. And I will ask if any members of the team have any other supporting comments. Now would be time for that. If not, I'll ask for comments from the board.
All right, so, the idea of this part of the discussion, of course, is for us to agree upon the major areas of focus, the primary goals that should guide our work this year. What I'd like to do is provide just some other supporting information that we might be able to utilize at this time and perhaps integrate it into what the superintendent has provided for us, and engage in discussion about really identifying those 4 or 5 or 6 goals for this year that we would evaluate our work as a governance leadership team and as a district upon.
I think we all have these, it's the 7 priorities.
Yeah, okay. So does everyone?
Should be copies in there.
All right, so you, on one side, of course, of the page, you have the 7 division priorities. These are priorities that we agreed upon a couple of years ago that has still been a part of the guiding in our work. What you have on the other side is just some samples in 4 major categories: academic progress, school construction and maintenance, transformation initiative, and budget. And this is simply provided as another framework that we might consider as we look at what we want to pinpoint as our goals for the year. What the superintendent has provided for us has goal number 1 in the academic area of administering CFAs developed by the school division with outcomes and targets. I want to hear now from the team what direction the board feels most comfortable moving in. And I know you're kind of seeing all of this for the first time, and you have to process. But I think it is important that our goals are in alignment with our priorities, meaning that there is a goal or goals associated with board accreditation that continues to move us in that direction, associated with overall increased academic achievement, climate safety and attendance, so on and so forth. and that they are SMART goals. That they're 12-month goals that we feel like we can accomplish in this school year, and that we can measure quarterly, mid-year, of course, and at the end of the year, we can determine whether or not we have made adequate progress. I know we're not going back to AYP, but we'll be able to determine whether we feel we've made adequate progress as a board. So without me reading everything that's on the page before us, I'm interested in your feedback based on what you've received, both from the superintendent and this other sampling of how we can proceed.
Well, I wonder at first, do we just need to validate that these are the board and division priorities and work from there, and then work towards goals that support those priorities? So these priorities were in place this past year and I believe the year before, if
Yes.
I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
So does anybody have any modifications or changes that they want to make to the priorities, I guess, at this point? Or are we still on target?
I agree with all the priorities, but it just occurred to me that, Dr. Houston, you mentioned this just a moment ago as you were, introducing the topic, is that we need to have SMART goals.
Right.
And I know these are priorities, and then we have goals. So I would just say that if we are asking the district to adopt a strategic plan, and we're asking the team to work on SMART goals for the strategic plan, I think that we as a board need to have SMART goals for whatever our priorities and whatever, our goals are going to be. So when we say in priority one, ensure full accreditation, and we further discuss it in our goals, well, when do we want to accomplish full accreditation?
Well, that actually came by recommendation of Dr. King here, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, yeah, it's at the end, it's at the last page there, but that's, so,
So the point, of course, the priorities aren't the goals, but again, my opinion, I think our goals should be extracted from both the second year phase one of the strategic plan in alignment with the priorities. You follow what I'm saying? But they ought to be the major things that we want to accomplish this year, whether it's 5, 6, 7, they should be akin to, or actually extracted from this year of the strategic plan as the ones that's been presented to us by Sam, as well as they should be in alignment, because this strategic plan is still very much in alignment with these priorities, these 7 priorities.
well, on the goals sheet, I don't see anything, in here, addressing climate, so is that gonna be a separate topic?
So that's for us to discuss right now, and so we have a couple of ways that we could approach this. One, we could look at the full accreditation priority.
Okay.
Say we want to make sure we have a goal associated to that, consider what we've already received related to, that which will move us to work for accreditation, and just work there for right now. Frank?
I think going back to what Ms. Doyle said about affirming that these are our priorities, I think that would be, in my mind, the first step, and then go through each priority and determine the goals based upon that.
All right.
So I make a motion that we approve the continuation of the board and division priorities,
Okay,
2014, 2015.
Okay. Is there a second to that motion?
I second it.
Okay. Moving properly second, any discussion that we maintain these division priorities this year as the board's continued priorities? Any discussion? All in favor, let me know by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Motion carries. Thank you, Brad. So having said that, let's start with full accreditation and look at those goals, Sam, that you feel that you presented, that, and what you're indicating is that 1 and 2 kind of support each other, okay? So the very first objective, elementary schools administering common formative assessment developed by school division. Obviously, this would be a goal that supports the priorities 1 and 2. So what I want to hear now from us is do we want to embrace that as one of the goals that we will measure our work by this year? And if not, let's get recommendations on the table of what we feel as a governance leadership team would be a smart goal for these two, that would support these two priorities. Yes. Rodney.
So, I'm lost, just what you know.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm lost too.
And I feel like we are all over the map.
Yeah.
And, you know, yesterday there were, you know, news articles about SOL irregularities and how proud we were about being transparent. I don't consider this process transparent at all. And we had work plans before that we tried to review, and then sometimes we pay attention to them, sometimes we don't. We just went through some discussion of the strategic plan, and we talked about trying to fix those indicators. Now I get preliminary accreditation scores, some work plan and some goals, and you're asking me to give you some constructive comment on priorities. I can't do it. I won't do it. And I just think this process is it's insulting. I spent a lot of time trying to be a good board member. I just think this is not good, and I can't give you any quality input without having an opportunity to read the materials that's been provided. We had said when we were doing our work sessions, we were going to do the best we could to get materials to us by Friday. I've been asking for these preliminary scores for weeks. We just get them in a chart today, and now somehow I'm supposed to understand each elementary school will administer common formative assessments developed by the school division, and there's no real description or clarification around the success that we had with the CFAs we just did last year, and whether or not it helped with some of these or whether or not it harmed some of these. So I'm not sure how I'm supposed to do what you're asking me to do with the level of process and presentation that we have right now. And I think the board deserves better. I think the children deserve better. And, you know, I mentioned earlier, I went over to Portsmouth and I sat in that meeting and I understood more about what was going on in Portsmouth in 4 hours. And I'm sitting here in Norfolk in my own district, and I am thoroughly confused about what we're doing and how we're doing it and why we're doing it. And I just don't think that's fair. So if you all can work through it, that's fine. I'm just going to be silent through it. I'm going to go home and I'm going to read it, and I'll send you my questions. And after I get feedback, I can give the board feedback. But to ask to do this on top of all of the things that we've talked about and other things that we have on the agenda, I just don't think is fair, and I don't think it's in fitting with the process that we said we were going to agree for our work sessions and towards being a board of distinction, all these things that we talk about. I don't consider it transparent at all. I just feel like I'm being filibustered and just having data thrown at me and then asking me to make decisions without giving me the time to review the information. So I'm going to sit here and review the information.
So here's what we'll do. We will consider these goals in a smaller group, come back to the larger group with clearer recommendations, and we'll complete the process that way. Okay? Yes,
But-
Noah?
But Mr. Jordan brings up a very good point. If we're going to vote or agree to consider CFAs by the elementary school and the secondary schools, we need to see the alignment of the CFAs with the SOL scores for this year.
Sure.
And then take it a step further and see how the teachers felt about the
Right.
implementation of the CFAs, going back again to that survey, or the teacher survey. Because and I know that we have to do assessments, I understand that, and I know,
the assessments have to come at certain timeframes. But we don't see the alignment of the effectiveness of the CFAs at this point in time. I'm sorry, I need to see then, well, the board, it would be nice to see the CFAs and the benchmarks that have been done this year and how the SOL scores this year, when you look at them over time, are comparative to them. And if we have benchmarks that are in the 60s and we have SOLs that are in the 80s, then there's a difference there. So all I'm saying is, before we adopt this mantra of the CFAs, let's just make sure that the CFAs that we're doing right now, the teachers feel confident about them and that they are a proven measure of the goals that we're working towards for the SOL. If the CFAs are not going to be a predictor for SOL success, and if it's just a matter of students taking tests, which I know it's not, I'm just saying, then why would we adopt a goal? Why would we adopt a goal for that?
Information clearly that's been shared with us today that we have to digest. How about if we take a bit of a step back and have the ability to look at this data and regroup with perhaps a recommendation of goals that would be aligned, but knowing we need potentially additional data to go into it, and that all board members would submit their questions and otherwise in advance so that we know what those should be, because you make a good point about the CFAs, and there's not the only part that we probably need to know in order to know if a goal is valid. So, to me, it just seems like we need a bit of a timeout.
Absolutely, and that's what I'm saying, is that we will pull back, we'll work together, executive leadership team, to provide more clarity around these issues, represent it to the board, and then we'll move from there. Okay, I just want to make sure our time together is productive. All right, so let's move on to item 2.04. School board policy review. Mr. Jordan?
Yes.
You're in the driver's seat with this.
Yes. Let my blood vessel calm down just a little bit, and I will be good to go. I'm good. I got some lemonade right here. Got my hard stuff. So, we had a meeting Monday, and you may recall that we had talked about trying to improve the policy process from the times that they would come down from VSBA to us and review and so forth. And Dr. King had assigned Dr. Birdsong to be the internal person. And Dr. Birdsong shared a process chart. But really where we are as a committee, we want to really get together and work and finish the process of taking what Dr. King has recommended from the administrative perspective and some of the things that we've talked about as a board, some of the policies that we put into in the parking lot to come before the policy committee, and really do a good job of presenting to the board how the policy committee should function. You know, what our role is, what our expectations are, what comes to us, what doesn't come to us. And so we didn't get a chance to do that yet. But what we did do Monday was we looked at the policies that are currently on this work session, and we did it in an initial review. And sort of as an example of how we think the policy committee may work, we reviewed each of the policies that included Reverend Haywood and myself, along with Janelle and Attorney Cloud and representatives from teaching and learning and student support. And so we actually had it was actually a good conversation. But what we would recommend to the board based upon our initial review, subject to some other recommendations maybe that may come from the staff at this point, is that we hold on acting upon the homebound, the IGBG policy, the IKFA policy, the IKG policy, and the JED policy. And Janelle has sent out an email that each of you should have in your email box that kind of explains the rationale for that. But to try to put it in a nutshell, we just thought there was some additional work that needed to be done. Some of them may involve what do y'all call those things that you all do? Regulations, thank you. Some may call for some regulations, and so we wanted to give the administration time to do that. And then in a couple of cases, the state board may have acted upon some policies, and we wanted to make sure that they were aligned. So if you all accept that recommendation, then the one policy we would recommend that we spend time discussing today is the one dealing with student fees and fines, JN. And that was subject to some updates that I think you all may have done. Okay, and so what we would recommend is to have the administration share with the board JN, and then and we have our normal discussion in preparation for the regular meeting, and that you all allow us to go back next week, work on our structure of our committee, and then come back with later recommendations. I think we determined in our conversation that each of the ones that we're asking to be put on hold are not time sensitive. And then the other piece I would add to it is, while there is that process where the policies come from VSBA and on up, we really thought, and Reverend Haywood, please chime in, that the other function of our committee would be to address policy ideas that would come from the board for us to consider. And then the committee then would give an opportunity for the administration and legal counsel and others to then actually take an idea, form it into a policy. We would then come back and make a recommendation to the full board, and then from there would determine whether or not it would go forward for action. So those are kind of the, if I'm being clear, those are kind of the two areas. So one is doing the review on some VSBA policies. We don't think we should be reviewing all of them, but if there's some of the ones that may have significant budgetary impact or significant regulation impact, we would take up in the committee. And then those such as, I used the example that Dr. Birdsong from time to time has come to us and suggested some policies we may want to consider with hard to staff schools, or not too long ago we got the report on the salary issues, and so if there's some policy items that come out of that, then that would come to the committee. So that makes sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Reverend Haywood, anything you want to add to
I think you summed it up well. I think looking at these policies that we've placed on hold is very necessary for us to, we could not make the decisions on these until we completed some additional, until we got some additional information on a number of these things. And so it's pretty clear that that's the case. And that is true, what Mr. Jordan is saying, that we need to look at the processes because of that second part of policy coming from the board, and the need to understand how we will process those policies. So, yeah, you summed it well.
Another example, I have no idea, I think maybe all of you did receive the email from an organization that was recommending that we look at adopting policies around employment discrimination. So if
Yeah.
something like that came in and the board thought it was appropriate to refer that to the committee, then we would work with the administration to review that and come back with some appropriate recommendation. Mr. Cloud, Attorney Cloud, anything, I mean, you, Janelle, Dr. Moore, others that you all
I think
wanted
you've
to
summed
add?
it up fine.
So any questions then?
Ronnie, you said that Janelle, there might be an email in our inbox.
Yes.
Can you?
I'm having a little difficulty with Outlook at the moment.
Okay, I was gonna say, I
Yeah,
wasn't
I
sure
was
if
just
it,
checking.
just because we made the transition between group-wise to Outlook, and I didn't know if the email had come earlier or if it was as we speak.
Oh, no, it came maybe about a couple hours ago.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, and
Okay,
pretty much
so-
it was a,
Because it's not on there.
Janelle did a
Just-
very good
Okay.
synopsis of the meeting, and then she described each of the policies, what the recommendation was, and some of the issues we may have looked at to,
Okay.
why we may have said place on hold.
Okay, so we don't have that.
All right, but we are recommending that we go forward with discussing JN student fees. The committee is recommending approval.
Okay.
So, Dr. Houston, I don't know if Dr. Lands or what the process we would normally follow, but we are recommending that the board approve that policy.
We note that that those fees need to be updated.
And I think that's what they're prepared to do.
Yeah, I would just recommend that, since we've all read your recommendation and you're recommending that we approve it, if we just have questions, then we just ask. I don't necessarily think we need a full explanation of it because we've read it. Does that rest with people well? Because, for instance, my one question is this something that we're choosing to update on our own? Was it General Assembly dictated as an update of the regulation? Why is it we're revisiting now, simply?
The Board of Education passed a regulation that required that these policies be much more detailed.
Okay.
And actually, they have to be posted on the website, and starting with the coming year, they have to be distributed
Okay.
every year to
Okay.
the
You're now
parents.
referring to JN?
Yes.
Student fees,
Yes.
In the past, the student fees were not listed in the way they were listed.
Okay, so it's a change required to be made of us to now.
But I think it might be good to allow Dr. Moore, Dr. Lands to at least explain, because one of the things that we keyed on in the committee that came up for us was that just the way this is structured, these fees that we are adopting, when we vote on this in a couple of weeks, becomes the gospel for the year. And if there's some changes to fee structures next year, then we would come back again and update it. But there was also a component in here that kind of described that based upon certain conditions that and Dr. Savigny was explaining to me over the break, that these things are optional. So I would just like for the board, maybe just for a few minutes, to hear that process, the optional and how you all went about determining the fee structure, just so you can be fully aware of that.
Good afternoon. As you mentioned, Dr. Moore worked with Mr. Cloud and staff to come up with the fees that are listed in the draft policy that you have, and contacted multiple staff members across the district to determine which of these fees and which optional fees we have. And we do plan to, and I'll have Dr. Moore in just a moment give you an overview of some of those fees, but plan to add this information as required to our student handbook or other ways to distribute it to all parents to make sure that they have it, and that we would determine a period of time, a couple of times a year, or however many times is appropriate, and then redistribute the information on an annual basis to make sure that parents have the most accurate information. So Dr. Moore, if you'd like to highlight some of those fees
Sure.
that you found.
Some of the things I did is I would make contact with different senior coordinators, different principals, principal representatives across the district, representatives of art, music, sports, health and PE, those kinds of things. Just try to come up with as comprehensive a list as possible. The described fees. Now, some of the fees were very specific. Some of them had a range. So if it had a range, I tried to capture the range. Like prom and stuff like that, depending on where they went, it could cost from this to this. So I'm not saying that there's not a fee out there that I didn't capture, because there could be. But that's the purpose of each and every year. As we go through the year, as we find things that come up, we'll keep a running list, and then we'll add them. Some of the things need to be updated yearly, like with the supplementary reading materials. I went to the websites and I got the current information as of a couple days ago. We're gonna have to do that each and every year as part of this policy update review. Some things may go away, some things may need to be added, but the basic broad areas were art, supplementary reading materials, extracurricular activities, music, There were some optional fees. One of the things I didn't think about until somebody told me was ROTC, their uniforms. I just wasn't thinking that. Sports, technology, education, textbooks. I got with the office managers. They were very, very helpful. They seemed to know everything about what kind of fees are charged. But those are the broad areas. Like I said, this is going to have to be reviewed throughout the year and updated probably every August.
Comment? This is my reaction, having dealt with this for several decades. Once you start explicating all these things, if you leave something out, should it be the assumption that since you left it out, it is not possible? So there's lots of little hidden things in doing this that I would want to make sure that in the state's wisdom, and the state is wise, that things are not overlooked in that, and that there be some inclusion, Mr. Cloud,
There's a little
for
blurb.
something being overlooked and for someone not telling us, you can't because you didn't list it. So there are some difficulties to, once you start down this road of saying what should happen and what will happen and what costs what and whatever, of omissions by accident, and then what is the implications for not being able to do what we want to do. Those are just some concerns about it. This is difficult, and if we think the state has said we have to do this, the state is wise. Well, then that's sort of my reaction, that the state is wise. I have the same concerns, but the way the regulation is written, we're supposed to actually identify the fees. And strictly speaking, and again, in terms of regulation, is written, the fee, I think the only interpretation of the regulation is if the fee is not identified, then it shouldn't be charged. And the only thing we can really do is to keep on top and try to identify all the fees My that. only hope is that we have some escape clause in there.
There's a little piece right
That gives Dr. King, yeah, thank you, it gives Dr. King some cover in the event that something is required and that someone cannot say, Dr. King and colleagues cannot do this because of this. So thanks for listening.
One of the lines is any additional funds the students are requested to furnish must be approved by the superintendent of schools on the recommendation of the principal. So there's a mechanism, if something comes up, we just have to get.
Since I just got it, it was a little difficult to know what all was in there.
Dr. Moore, in your research, were you able to find out whether there is a policy concerning the fees that are reduced away for economically disadvantaged students?
That was one of the pieces we were talking about the other day. And that may be something we have to develop more specifically. There's lots of practices in buildings where schools are interested in having children participate, and they'll find ways to get kids to participate, like fundraisers or other mechanisms. But this policy does have a discussion about fees are reduced or waived for economically disadvantaged students, those undergoing economic hardships, and gives a couple of different examples. I mean, at some point, we may want to spell that out a little more specifically, maybe come up with a form that could go with it because it says we're to let people know that these fees could be waived under certain circumstances.
I think that's critical, having seen this kind of thing operationalized. Do we want to really let the star spelling not be in the spelling bee because they couldn't pay the $5?
And part of what we were recommending back to you, Dr. King, and to the board members is that you all just go back and take a look to see whether or not there was some way to just try to ensure, Dr. Stewart, that there was some uniformity across the district if they called for that, or if not, that we were just clear. Because we wanted to avoid a scenario where it seemed like at one school, one teacher could do X, and another school, somebody else could do Y, and have parents asking us, well, how come my child gets an exemption and the other child didn't? But we didn't feel that there was any way they were going to be able to do that timely enough, so we just kind of put that back on them to take a look at it and come back to us later on that.
My concern is that the school system has such a large percentage of students that are economically disadvantaged. Are we setting ourselves up for financial challenges down the road with these waivers? We have to consider that.
School that I was at for years and years, typically didn't charge students for, I mean, they found a ways around it. And maybe some of the other administrators who work across different schools would know if that's the same in other places, but we really tried to find a way to come up with the funds. I mean, even field trips, I mean, there was like Title I dollars for some things, fundraising for other things, PTA for other things. But that was because the principal at that school made it a priority.
Is that the same as waiving the fee? And who becomes responsible for it?
Unofficially.
So, what's the recommendation on the committee?
The recommendation is that you approve the policy, but also, as you all just discussed, that they come back, you know, as they fit everything else in with trying to address some of these issues that we just talked about.
Regulation-wise?
Regulation-wise,
Sure.
correct.
Okay. Well, again, it would be on the agenda in the business meeting. We were going to approve it. Is there anyone that would not be in favor of approving it as presented?
Speaking to the greater section, this was the old policy about which I had a question.
But this is the only one that's before us tonight, the JN policy.
That's why it's one on.
And so, as it is presented to us tonight, is there anybody that would not be in support of adopting it? It would be on the consent agenda in our business meeting. All right, silence to me is affirmation. So we'll place it on the agenda for vote next
The question you asked, is anybody opposed to it? If everybody is in favor of it, then do you think you get more verbal?
I'm not sure. We can try that.
Postprandial depression, low blood sugar.
So I hear support, and I don't want to.
I can understand and support this.
Good, very good. All right, thank you. And we'll hear more from the development of the policy committee in the upcoming months. Yes, Mr. Jordan? Okay, item 2.05, human resources. Dr. King?
Chairman Houston, members of the board.
Let's get started.
2.05, human resources will be in reference to the hiring process and an update around the hiring process. Dr. Birdsall.
Good afternoon, Dr. Houston, Mrs. Doyle, Dr. King. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to provide a brief update on staffing for Norfolk Public Schools. As always, you should have received your monthly termination report, so you have the overall data for the school division as it relates to terminations for the 2013-2014 school year, as well as specific data for each schools and the reasons that teachers were terminated from the school division. I did want to bring good news about hiring. According to our report, we lost about 353 teachers last year, and we still have about, and this is an approximate number, about 100 teachers to hire for next school year. But we have been very pleased with our efforts thus far to fill our classrooms. We had a job fair on July the 28th at Granby High School. We had a wonderful turnout, and we were able to interview at least 125 teachers, and this is at least a 32% increase from last year because we had about 95 teachers that showed up at our July job fair. We were able to offer some contracts during that time, and as well as early commitment letters, and so again, we're very excited, so excited that we're having another job fair on Monday. at Granby High School, and we believe that we will have a great turnout based upon the number of interviews that we have scheduled thus far. So are there any questions about terminations? We have about 5,000 teachers. I'm sorry, about 3,800 teachers.
We lost 350, so it's about 10%.
Yes.
Just
Yes.
under 10, just under
We-
10%.
We lost, specifically, we lost 13.1%.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Point of clarity, when Dr. White and Dr. Phillips were here, and the question was asked about the new teachers there, for P.V. Young and Totworth, all those teachers have been placed, correct?
Absolutely.
They don't have any more, they don't have any current vacancies, correct?
Teachers were placed in May.
Okay, that's
Based
what I
on the
thought.
transformation model. But please be reminded that we lost teachers at the end of the school year. So it could have been that teachers were placed from one school to another school, but for whatever reason, there could have been a military move, there could have been, I want to stay at home with my children, or for whatever reason, I'm not coming back next year. And so that would create vacancies.
So they may indeed have some vacancies now that they're trying to fill? Is that-
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, you're exactly right. And we have made an effort to ensure that our priority and focus schools are provided a little more attention in terms of staffing, because I know there's a concern about the number of new teachers that we have in some of our schools. And so during the job fairs, we are offering those principals an opportunity to come at least 1 hour prior to other principals, so they kind of get first dibs on all of the new teachers coming into the district. And so we're working very closely with them to ensure that they are 100% filled before the very first day of school.
Other questions or comments? Yeah, we got the gavel going.
Okay, thank you.
Look at the livestock.
Item 2.06, operations. Dr. King.
Item 2.06 will consist of PPEA update. Dr. Simmons.
And Dr. King, if you and the board would allow, I'd like to, before we cover the PPEA update, I have Helen Phillips here. There's an an item that I'd like to bring to your attention that will require board approval that we were just made aware of. There will be a need to increase school lunch by 10 cents, and Helen is here to address that. And we did not increase school lunch last year, and every year we should be incrementally increasing based upon the law. And so she was kind enough to come in with her daughter, so I want to give her a
She's
chance to
watching TV.
speak. Yeah.
What happens is with the Healthy Hunger-Free Kids Act of 2010, which went effective July 1, school districts are required to raise their meal prices at a maximum of 10 cents a year. That's the requirement by USDA to meet the minimum or to meet the reimbursement for a free meal. Right now in Norfolk, our reimbursement rate is just over $3. So according to Congress and USDA, we should be charging our full-price kids the same amount for their lunch at school, which would be, I think our reimbursement rate is $3.03 now. We are at currently $1.70 in our elementary schools and $1.85 in our secondary schools. And so by that law, we should increase 10 cents next school year. And by a slip of me, because I knew it was law, wasn't sure if it needed to have school board authorization also. And so that's why we're coming late in the game to ask for the 10 cents. Last year, we did not raise our prices to 10 cents, and that was due to after USDA put out this law, then they came up with some flexibility in the law. And one of those flexibilities is if the school district or the school nutrition program is in good financial standing, which means that we are allowed to have a maximum of 3 months operating expenses in our fund balance. And if we have that, we are not required to raise prices unless we still want to, because there's some improvements we want to do to the program. So last year we did not raise our prices, and that was partially the reason why. This year we still haven't closed out yet for the year, so I'm not real sure exactly where we are because we're not done closing out. And if we miss that, then we're gonna be into the school year, and then it's gonna be difficult to raise prices once school starts. So last year, we had no raise in the price for school lunch, but this year we are asking for the 10 cents, which would put our elementary schools at $1.80 and our secondary schools at $1.95. We will continue to not charge our reduced price kids. We could charge them a maximum of 40 cents, but we have not charged them anything in, I think, 21 years now, so we're not gonna do that.
Okay.
And breakfast is staying the same at 90 cents. This is only a lunch price thing.
Questions on this matter?
Just a quick one. When was the last time we raised our prices?
The 11-12 school year.
I just don't remember voting on it, but that's not unusual.
And see, because when the law passed, I think it still came here as like an authorization, because it's either we have to pass the price increase or some other entity, meaning the school board, has to pay that 10 cents, which is about $65,000.
Okay. Time sensitivity on this matter related to a vote. Is it something we need to take action on tonight, or the 20th? Meeting is the 20th. Is when we would typically vote in our business meeting. What's the time sensitivity related to you?
We wanted to inform you tonight and take a vote at the next school board meeting.
Okay, that's fine. Okay. Are there any other questions about it? Thank you very much.
All right, and apologies for being late to the table on that one. Sorry.
Okay.
And now for the PPEA update.
It wasn't working for me.
Oh, it's not working. Janelle, can you forward? It's not working. Thank you. Oh. Okay, good. Okay, this first slide just speaks to the business relationships that Steve Ballard and his team are working toward. His goal is 50% small women and minority-owned businesses, and I know this question had come up before. So to that effect, he's hosted a couple of open houses on April the 9th. He had 162 contractors in. On June the 11th, 61 contractors attended. He's engaged minority business in the demolition of Campus Stella, and he's had one-on-one meetings with them. And he has first-tier subcontractors that are strongly encouraged to hire people that are local in the city. And you can find more information on his website. I just wanted to give you that background information regarding how he's engaging partners in the process. This is the final rendering that we have so far of Campus Stella. And you may have already seen this if you attended a public meeting. And the next slide covers the site. We have had a lot of conversation with Parks and Recreation, Deb Rock, Steve Sutmiller, and some more staff. And it looks like we're going to need a full regulation football field on the Campus Stella school site because there is not one on the south side. So that would be reflected, this change is reflected here. It will be a regulation field for the community and for the school for kids to participate. The baseball field may need to be a substandard size because we don't have a lot of land that we're dealing with this particular building location. We had to shift the building over to make more space for the football field. That's a change you'll see reflected here. And I don't want to get into a lot of detail, but I do want to point out some changes that have resulted as a result of lots and lots of community input for each of the schools. For example, with the Campus Stella building, we moved the gymnasium to the stage side after having much community input regarding using it for assembly programs as well as for the gym. We changed the cafeteria area to accommodate a greater flow. We revised the main vestibule, if you're looking at the floor plan, so that we'd have a better line on security. We can see people coming in and out of the building a lot easier. This revision was made on 3 other school sites also. We added a student toilet within the media room, which is a change. And we put more classrooms, so we have about 230 choice seats for Campus Stella now as compared to what we were planning before. And in doing that, it's an addition of 4 classrooms on the 2nd and 3rd floor. We added storage to the 1st floor. And we had new classrooms were added to the upper floors. We added space to the media center to accommodate having the additional 230 students. We put in more space in the cafeteria to accommodate the children, and we added more circulation space in the stairwell, which you might see visually in the floor plan. And we moved an elevator to accommodate staff.
How much did that cost, change the cost?
We are still working right now to get the costs down. So we are not through with the discussions. Right now, we're about $6 million over the projected budget, and we are having to make several adjustments, and we don't know what the final outcome is going to be of that as we move forward. Oh, goodness. Okay, we'll move on.
Question regarding that.
Okay.
Before you go beyond that, so, I'm a football player and I love football, but I'm curious, is this requirement, the words that we use are have to? Is there some, something, have we ever had one there before?
I didn't mean to use the word have to, it's probably more my vernacular than
Okay.
anything else. We don't have to. What we are trying to do is listen to the community and what their desires are, listen to the school. And
As long
it's
as it's
been
not a have to, it's-
No, it's not a have to.
Yeah, and we haven't had one there before, didn't have one?
No, not on the south side. There is
Right.
not a place for children to play football.
Right,
Right.
gotcha,
Okay.
that's good.
So all parties seem to agree, and that will have a price impact. It's gonna cost an additional amount of money to put that field there.
And
So, sorry?
So if that means $6 million over, where are the cuts gonna come from?
And that's a conversation that will occur within the PPA committee as we continue to move forward. I can tell you, and if Rex were here, he'd say it much better than me, we are going to reserve some of the materials and equipment in our buildings. Some of it can be reused. That's going to be a cost savings. FF&E, once we begin to make purchases, once we determine from a technology perspective what we're going to place in those schools when you buy in bulk, that's going to save money. So there are many ways, we're looking at many different approaches to trying to save that, and we'll be in conversation with the city.
I'm just concerned that $6 million is a lot of money, and start cutting on quality of materials, and that school building's gonna have to last a long time.
We have been assured there won't be any compromise on quality, so.
Okay.
Or programming. Okay. And the next site, of course, is Camp Allen. And we have listened to lots of school input on Camp Allen, probably more school input than community input at those meetings. And because of that, there's not much of a change with the site plan. It will remain the same, and so I'll just go on to the next slide with that. You've seen this before. The stage, though, has been relocated from the cafeteria to the gymnasium to accommodate what the staff requested. We've added toilets to the special education classrooms. We've changed the room at the teacher's workroom. That's a reading lab on the second floor. We've added a teacher toilet on the first floor. We flipped the first and second grade locations. We've created a security lobby and reworked the administration area, if you're looking at the floor plan. We've revised the second floor at the Computer Lab Media Center workplace with the stage relocation to the first floor. They straightened out an angled wall to create more space, and we relocated the ESL from the second floor to the first floor to accommodate a bathroom in a special ed area, and we've added viewing rooms for special ed classrooms. Those are the changes so far, and they were based on input from the staff. I don't know if you have any questions on Camp Allen. If not, we'll move on to the Broad Creek Area School.
I have one question on Camp Allen.
Okay.
I know that the anticipation for the school at Broad Creek and the school in the south side is fall of 2016. Anticipation, hope for, not a deal. The anticipation for Larchmont and Ocean View, hope for, not a deal, is 2017. Do we have a hope for for Camp Allen yet? Is there any hope for?
The hope for would be in line with what we had discussed earlier, somewhere.
Which was, that's what I'm.
Yes,
I
that
can't-
has not changed. It's going to be somewhere between the construction of Camp Estella and the Broad Creek Area School, if not two at the same time. We, of course, have to comply with federal regulations and lots of other groups that we're working with. And as soon as we get the red light, they are looking at moving forward.
So instead of September
Green
of
light,
16.
green light.
Instead of September of 16 and September of 17, it would be like January of, and it was mid-year? I'm just curious.
For Camp Estella or?
Hope for.
Oh, I
For
cannot.
Camp
I-
Allen.
Yeah, I don't want to give you a hope for Camp Allen because
Okay.
we have too many things that are not definite right now
Good enough.
to make that call, but we will be making it soon.
Good enough.
With the Broad Creek Area School, we have relocated the entry site, as you might notice from, flip ahead of myself. All right, we've relocated the entry site from Princess Anne to Dorchester Street, and that should help us from a traffic perspective. We've reconfigured the bus loop. We've improved pedestrian access onto the site, as you might notice from the site plan. We've added perimeter fencing and landscaping, which was a concern voiced by the community. We provided additional building elevations that the community has already seen. The schematic design blends parking with the branch library that's going to be on site there, along with increased parking for staff, which gives more parking space for people who come to the school. We've increased the square footage on the cafeteria to accommodate our standard tables that we use in Norfolk and the lunch schedule. We've redesigned administrative areas in response to staff comments, redesigned the media center, and there will be a follow-up meeting to continue to discuss that. As in the other schools, we've redesigned the stage to accommodate the gym so that we can have more staged events. We've redesigned all 3 sites in response to community comments, reconfigured the entry at the vestibule for increased security so that we can see people coming in and out of the building. We've added group toilets in the classroom wing. And you might notice that we flipped the floor plan so that we could have greater parking and switch the entrance to the building, which is a difference than what you've seen before. The basic floor plan itself has not changed. Any questions on?
If there were cost increases like there with Camp Estella, does any of this result in cost increases?
Not so far. No cost increase so far. And no cost increase with Larchmont either, which is the next school coming up.
So these schools, Camp Allen, Broad Creek, Ocean View, and Larchmont, all are coming in at 22 million apiece, or is it more?
Camp
Oh.
Allen's
No, Camp
Camp
Allen
Allen
is
is
more.
27, yeah. The others are 22. Or
So
32.
far.
Yeah. And so Camp Estella then would come in at 40 with the 6 million. Yeah.
We are not through making adjustments, but that's a random number
Okay.
that I would not like to quote. When I attended the Civic League meeting in the Larchmont community, it was expressed that they would like to maintain the identity with the historic nature of the community and see that evidence in the construction of the building. And I think that's what you see here. They went back and tried to provide a building that would fit nicely into the community. And these are some of the changes that they have made to accommodate that.
Are they happy with it? I mean, what's the feedback?
We are continuing to get feedback. We have another meeting that we're going to have with them too. But unless you're hearing something different, so far, so good. We do have more follow-up meetings to have with them.
Yeah, I think the question
Nobody's
globally is gonna be, sorry,
You said just nobody's calling. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
is how are we following back up with these communities after this? And when are we, I guess? So I know these are work in progress, but how is it that we then revisit these with the communities for them to know this?
Yeah, more community meetings are being scheduled, so we are not through yet. And, you know, the focus, I think, is first on Campus Stella as we move through that process because it's first on the list. We still have time for many more meetings here.
Okay.
So there will be follow-up meetings.
Very good.
And they are communicating also on the website, so we're capturing comments from the community there too, electronically. Everything is posted. I'm sorry?
Excuse me. But the bus lane, that has been put on the side of Larchmont now, or is it still in the front of the school?
Looks like it was all moved to the left, including the parking.
Right.
So the parking was in the front to begin with, and now it's
Right.
been moved.
It's been
and
moved
bus
to the
lane
left
has
with the
now
bus,
been
with the bus
modified as
loop.
well.
Okay.
You probably noticed that difference in the layout here.
Well, I see it.
Yeah, it's quite a bit different.
Yeah, I see it.
So they swapped the bus and the parent drop-offs. They relocated the playing fields to avoid existing trees. And that was expressed by the community. They spent a lot of time over the weekend with their kids in that area, so they'll still be able to do that. They relocated the stormwater management basins, added perimeter fencing. There was a concern about that and as it relates to school safety. They provided additional building elevations for the community to see. That's been posted. They increased the square footage in the cafeteria to accommodate the standard tables and lunch schedule, redesigned the administration areas in response to what the teachers said they wanted there in the building, redesigned the media center, and we're still working on that concept. There are more meetings that we'll have to have. They redesigned the stage associated with the gym and reconfigured the vestibule for increased security so that we can see who's coming in and out of the building. We added more toilets, and as you can see, the floor site plan has been flipped. It's much different than the first one that you saw. And that change was made to accommodate the athletic areas on the back and to allow a safer bus routing and parking area.
Yeah, the mechanical entrance is away from where most of the kids are walking.
Yes, it's away from most of the kids where they're walking, and also where it was before was a visual eyesore. And they didn't want that to be the first thing they saw.
Facing Hampton Boulevard.
Exactly. So all of that has changed when they flipped the building.
And no additional cost to all these changes?
So far, no additional cost has been mentioned. And the final school is Ocean View. And this is a conceptual rendering that you see. They're talking in terms of that whale being done in mosaic tile. So far, that's what they're looking at doing. They've added more softball and baseball fields. This is not the final rendering of the school. This is just what we have so far. Okay. And they've separated the bus loop from the parent drop-off loop. You'll see that that's a little bit different. If you notice, too, they've also flipped the floor plan so that we could accommodate the changes that I'm going through. They altered the site plan to retain the existing tennis courts. They added perimeter fencing. They improved pedestrian access to the site. They relocated the multipurpose room to the first floor, and they moved special ed resources second floor. Increased the cafeteria square footage to accommodate our standard tables. Redesigned the administrative areas based upon input from the staff. Redesigned the stage to be associated with the gym. That was a concern expressed by staff. And they reconfigured the entranceway vestibule for increased security and added more toilets and group toilets to the classroom wings. Those are the changes thus far for Ocean View. And we still have more meetings that we will be having to discuss changes with them also. And that's it for the PPA update. And if you have questions, I will try to answer them.
You started to answer the first one. Other meetings for each of the facilities planned?
They are being
Public meeting.
planned. Yes, there will be more public
So there will
meetings.
likely be, for each of the facilities, an additional public meeting.
Yes.
Costs in each of the facilities, just got 3 questions. Costs, you don't see appreciable increases in any of the Larchmont, Ocean View, Broad Creek?
I have not heard any change in pricing mentioned yet, but we might be premature for that.
And implicit in this, I love sports, and I love sports fields and need them for myself. But implicit in this decision is that Larchmont School current and Ocean View School current will come down because sports fields are going to be there. I just want to make sure that there's no doubt about that, that if this these decisions move forward, that is an implicit decision in those decisions.
That there will be sports fields there, is what you're saying.
There won't be a structure there. Some people may be still holding on to the idea that we have a nice auditorium at the current Larchmont, and we have a wonderful auditorium at the current Ocean View. I just want to make sure that no one is unclear that those edify will come down.
I'll respond by saying we are still receiving community input, but so far the structures will come down.
And that's the implicit assumption.
Yes.
Thanks.
When do you see the negotiations for the final contract being concluded through the PPEA?
I cannot give you an answer on that. I am not. It's supposed to be, let me not answer.
Well, and the reason I ask that is because that is the holdup for, well, one of the holdups for having board member participation in the construction committee of this, because we're not allowed to be on the PPA committee. But once that changes, we're supposed to be able to have board representation on that. And I was going to say, we should continue to push for that wholeheartedly.
That's a couple of things that I went backwards in. On the board side, when we got the letters from Larchmont folk and from Camp Stella, I know you mentioned that a lot of that input is still coming and you all are beginning to address that, but where do we, what's our role? I mean, in terms of advocating for things that we hear that we think may work best from a programmatic or academic standpoint that bubble up from the community. What's that process?
Yeah, you know, actually, that process isn't as
spelled out.
Clear.
exactly as it should be. One of the things I'm certainly confident in is that the information certainly makes its way to the table, the PPA committee, Dr. Simmons and others, as those concerns come in. That part I'm very confident in, but in terms of the board processing it and being able to say affirmatively to the administration, we feel that this request is not just reasonable but necessary for the quality education in the building, and so we wholeheartedly support this and would like to see this as a part of it. That piece isn't.
Because I think we should have something. I mean, even if it's us, just putting forward a resolution that we agree on.
Right.
It's non-binding, but just some resolution that says, yes, we support full gyms or whatever the issue may be. Because the other piece that kind of connected with that, I was watching the council session when Ron Williams was given, I guess, a similar update to council. And when he was discussing Campus Stella, he was saying that the board asked for 200 seats. And I know we've talked about a whole bunch of seats, and it sounds like they're back to the $40 million that they complained about us being at in the beginning. But I wasn't quite sure where that came from. I knew there was discussion. And I'm concerned about watching on TV and having folks say that the board asked for this or the board said that, and the board really has not, at least to my knowledge, spoken as a team and affirmed that type of thing. And then specific to Campus Stella, maybe somewhat to the new Broad Creek School, when we were having the conversation a couple of years ago about the size of Campus Stella and demographics and so forth, at least from my recollection, at least for me, it wasn't about trying to make sure that every single child in a particular attendance zone had a seat. It was really trying to be aligned with early on conversations where we were trying to reduce concentration of poverty and also trying to make sure that that pathway, at least for the Campus Stella, from the K-8 and the alignment with the middle school, because it just seems somehow in this conversation, Lake Taylor Middle School has just been forgotten, like it no longer exists anymore. So I'm just trying to make sure that if if you all have discussions amongst your team, that they don't necessarily get represented as somehow I mean, you all represent us, but if somebody is saying that the school board has endorsed something, it just seems to me that the school board ought to have endorsed what's being said that we have endorsed.
I agree with that.
I agree with that.
And I would like to let you know
Should I
that
take a
I
drink?
never present things as if it was what the school board would want. I have stood firm in all of my conversations with the PPA committee regarding the seats for Campus Stella, because we desired more than 200 seats.
Right.
And so I think that when Ron mentioned the school board, it would be probably the school representatives on PPA and not necessarily the school board. I'm thinking that's how he referenced it.
Yeah, because it was a little awkward, because I remember when he came over and presented these numbers to us, at that time, we weren't really supposed to talk about the numbers.
Right.
And then here's this presentation talking about the numbers and suggesting that we had asked for something, and you know how politics works. I just wanted to get some clarity on that, or at least for us to talk about what our process is. So if there are some specific things that we still aren't seeing, that we think are important, that there is some defined process, whether that's us giving it to you all, and then you all go advocate, or whether we do some resolution. Otherwise, it's going to get so far down the line, and we're just kind of like this silent partner in the whole deal.
It just really has a bad taste in my mouth.
Yeah. With you.
And it's
You and I have run those
not
circles
typical
before.
that we would be, one, building this number of schools at one time, and then, of course, entering into this kind of partnership with the city. Certainly didn't come with an extremely clear process, how we communicate all the way through, especially as it relates to feedback from the community. We've gotten a lot of recommendations. And then we have to determine, which has not been an easy process at all, needs versus wants, or necessities versus preferences, whether it's the combination of the cafetorium or gymatorium. Some of those things could just be preference, and there are pros and cons associated with each. Because I can't think of the name of the school, the last one we just built. Crossroads, we have the cafetorium there, with the music room on the backside, that seems to be a really good design.
But they built that whole gym on it, so it
Right.
kind of
Yeah.
balances that concern. One other, is Tucker School on the school system side or the city side?
We turned that back over to the city, I think.
So when they're in the conversation about the football field, I don't know what the city is looking to do at Tucker, but you have Tucker and the aquatic center that are right next door, and it just seems to me that there's plenty of area there. I don't know if they plan on developing something, but I don't know what the definition, when they say full-size football field, if they mean.
Just a standard for middle school students to compete.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole point of having the.
Has 100 yards we have?
That's why you have.
We need 120 yards plus buffer.
I can tell you that Dow Crittington, who is over Parks and Recreation, has been engaged in conversation with us the whole way in this. And so he did not mention that there would be a football field built at Tucker.
I just thought about that as you were
That might be a
saying it.
possibility.
Oh.
Yeah, it just seems to me that if the whole concept behind the middle school versus the K-8 is that the K-8 doesn't necessarily have everything that the middle school offers, but it sounds like we're increasingly trying to make the K-8 school the same thing as a middle school. But that's the whole.
Yeah.
It's never been the projection
Right.
that they would have full athletics
Right.
at
Because otherwise you cut the legs out from under the middle school.
Now, I can understand why they would want to have a full-size football field,
Right.
because there is not one
For
on the
community
south side for
access,
the
right.
community.
And that's why I was thinking Tucker puts it kind of on the rec side versus trying to necessarily tie it to
It could
the
be just-
school, when we may have other things inside of the building that we need to try to address.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Simmons. Okay, I'm going to have to transition. Ms. Doyle is going to lead the rest of the meeting as we move into 2.07. I'm going to turn the meeting over to Ms. Doyle. I have another obligation that I have to get to.
Okay, 2.07, Dr. Thornton. May we invite you to the table? And then, Dr. King, do you have anything to introduce for us on this topic?
2.07 consists of finance and business, a review of additional funding and appropriations that could impact moving our plans forward. With that, Dr. Thornton.
Good afternoon, Ms. Doyle, school board members. What I'd like to do for you is share with you two items. One would provide you with an update on where we are in recommended budget adjustments, which is a continuation of the conversation we had at the last meeting on July 16th. The other is a recommendation for the school board's consideration in terms of how we utilize existing funds as it relates to the school nursing program under our contracted services arrangement with the city, that we would transition to hiring some of those staff as opposed to relying on the city to staff them. So you should have at your place a one-page budget summary. I think Janelle said she provided you a hard copy in your packet, and it's also displayed on the screen. You'll recall at the meeting on July 16th, I shared with the board that based on some adjustments in state revenue as well as adjusted increases in federal revenue for the Medicaid reimbursement program, we were at that time recommending that we increase or adjust the budget as it has already been approved by approximately $142,000. And the recommendation at that time was that $130,000 of that be earmarked for the funding of 2 additional school nurse positions to bring us up to a total of approximately 50 for the school division, combined with what we would employ as well as what the city continues to provide and the Department of Health provides, to bring the grand total up to 50 school health-related positions. And the board had some conversation around it, and what we were asking the board to do at that time was to give us some indication as to whether or not they would support that, so HR and Dr. Birdsong and her team, as well as Dr. Harold Lands and her team, could begin to plan for those 2 additional school nurse positions. Since that time, we have received additional information from the state, unrelated to school nurses, but additional information regarding the state budget, wherein they're actually we're entitled to receive an additional $292,999, and this is very new. At the last meeting, we did not have this information. So what the state is providing that money for to certain school divisions and certain schools within those school divisions that qualify for additional state support to hire and staff additional math, reading, instructional specialists, as well as early reading interventionist specialists. Of course, you know, this past fiscal year, the school board, through local funding, staffed a math and reading specialist at each of our elementary and middle schools. This additional funding, again, just $293,000, would provide the state's share of funding for approximately 7 schools, 6 of which we already provide math and reading specialists at. The only school that we do not provide math and reading specialists for, that the state would provide funding for, would be Booker T. Washington High School. So the recommendation would be these additional funds, since the last time we met, a portion of which, $75,000 of the $292,000, would be used to staff an additional math or reading specialist at Booker T. Washington High School. So the bottom line is, what we shared with you at the July 16th meeting was a net increase of $142,000. And then since that time, the state is providing an additional $292,999, bringing the total recommended increase to the budget of $435,671. Again, of that increase, the administration's recommendation is that we staff 2 additional school nurse positions at an estimated cost of $130,000. And we also add the required math or reading specialist for Booker T. Washington at an estimated cost of $75,000. The remaining balance of approximately $230,000, at this point in time, in speaking with Dr. King, the administration would recommend that we basically hold that and designate it for other instructional support services needs that could come up between now and the beginning of the school year. There are some other things that are kind of lingering out there that perhaps Dr. King and team are not ready to make a recommendation on. So that will be where we are as it relates to the budget at this point. Before I get into the second item, I'd ask the board if they have any questions. Yes.
Well done. When I originally questioned this, my question was for Dr. King and colleagues, is there better use of this money for academic achievement, particularly at the secondary level, particularly at the high school level? Somehow, because of your all effort, we have more money, and so we can address those additional efforts. So the original $142,000, I now have to remove my worry about that because there are ways to do what I wanted to do, and this is really outstanding and exciting.
We didn't do anything, we just.
Well, I think y'all did. I have a feeling that they watched our broadcast and they knew what y'all needed to do.
We'll go with that.
Yeah, we'll go with that. But I also think that I still want to make sure that you have one board member asking you to make sure that if you need money, to make sure that our specialty programs, particularly at the high school, are certain as they can be, staff-wise and whatever, that they are. But good job. Good job.
Any other questions?
I'm very comfortable with the recommendation, but when Dr. Stewart had raised questions before about the secondary level, and we were talking about impact, and then recently, from a request from a parent, I understand that we're saying we aren't doing out-of-district transfers because of the changes in ratios. Remember I think that was correct. Remember the request from the parent, and so it seemed like because we have increased these ratios that we've put a hold on out-of-district transfers at the high school level. Is that?
The ratios of students
Is
to
that accurate?
teachers.
I wouldn't say that we placed a hold on out-of-district transfers, but the rule has always been based on capacity, based on open seats and that kind of thing. Mr. Coleman, you may have more comments on that, but it's
absolutely accurate.
Yeah.
In terms of out-of-district transfers, it's based on available seats. And it ties not to the specialty program so much, but actually the school capacity.
Yeah, I was
based on their staffing allotments.
Right, and we, in the staffing allotment, isn't that what we impacted when we impacted the
We did,
ratios?
but we did it across the board evenly for all of the schools. So no one school was, impacted any greater than any other. It was based on the enrollment numbers. So, there really is a balance, that took place in terms of the staffing allotment. So it just, rolls down to the available seats as well. So right now, in terms of, availability, really Booker T and Lake Taylor are the two places that do have some capacity to receive students if there was an out-of-district transfer request to those two schools.
May have misunderstood.
Well, we're going to take a look at what we have now to determine what are the priority needs in terms of where we are across the board and try to determine how best to recommend in terms of applying those dollars. And, if staffing, if it has implications for staffing, it gives us a chance to take a look at that in terms of.
Okay, yeah, because I was just looking at it, we were talking earlier about, school choice and options for parents.
Right.
And so
Right.
this one particular parent had a child who was at Blair. The child wasn't going into the Maury specialty program, but the parent was still looking for the child to follow that pathway.
Mm-hmm.
And then I guess the response that came back was that you could, because I guess the homeschool, I think, is Booker T. And so the response that came back was that things were on hold, not that it was being tied to the ratio. So.
Well,
I would like to, I don't know that
Yeah,
specific
I'll
incident, but the response, if it was based on capacity, should have been that, based on capacity, that the seats were maxed at the time. But I don't know that individual case though, so.
Any other questions?
So Dr. Thornton, do you need any action on that today, or will we vote on that as a board officially August 20?
At our last meeting, we were anticipating, based on city staff recommendation, that the council would appropriate would amend the additional appropriation at its upcoming August 22nd meeting. But we've now understand that they're going to push that back until September.
Okay.
So to your question, we're asking the board again to just give an indication that they would support this, so HR can move forward with the advertising and staffing, and then once council takes its final appropriation amendment, we would come back to the board so you could take your final action to approve the budget itself, the budget adjustment. Probably later in September, because, like I said, they had originally, city staff had indicated that council was planning to do their appropriation on August 22nd. But it's my understanding they've since pushed it into September. So we may come back to you at your second meeting, your business meeting in September, or perhaps even October. It just depends on when the council makes their final appropriation amended appropriation.
I know you don't know the answer to this, but I trust and hope that this allows you to use this money wisely so that we have all the folks on board we need, but good luck.
Thank you.
So
The-
do I get the sense that the board would be in favor of the way we're approaching it today if there were a vote taken?
I see nods, yes?
I am with the assumption that the high school specialty programs are staffed in the way that the superintendent thinks is wise at this time.
Okay, duly noted. Okay, so I think you're getting relative consent,
Okay.
and you have a second agenda item?
The second item that's relatively new, but it's still under that nursing model. You may recall that a couple of years ago, the city council decided, well, historically, the city, through the Department of Health, have been staffing nurses for us. And basically, on a contracted services, they've been providing those nurses to us. They're employees, but we were contracting the services from the city through the Department of Health. In our effort to make the transition over to hiring them ourselves, the city has kept vacancies open as they have come up. So we wouldn't have to deal with the transition of people that were already staffed by the city becoming school employees. So at the end of this past school year or fiscal year, the city had 8 positions vacant that they would generally staff and then provide to the schools. What we're asking the board to do is to authorize us to hire those 8 positions, or to add those 8 positions to our budget and use monies that we previously would have paid to the city under the contracted services agreement, and basically staff them as our own. So as opposed to us paying the city for those 8 positions, we would basically staff them here. So
These
what
crossing
we're-
guards?
No, school nurses, still with school nurses.
Still with school nurses.
So what we're asking the city to do is to authorize us to create the FTEs. It won't require any new funding. Basically, we're using contract services funding, shifting it over to staff areas. So the bottom line is that in addition to the 2 that would be new, that you've already given some consensus around, we would be asking the board to authorize 8 additional FTEs that will become our employees, but it will not require additional funds.
So it's net neutral transfer?
Net
of
neutral transfer. Instead of
FTEs.
paying the city monies, we would keep the monies here and hire them ourselves.
Okay. Any thoughts or questions? Any concerns? Okay. Do you need any formal action tonight, or will that accompany any formal action later?
Formal action later.
Okay.
Yep.
I think you're probably gathering there's relative consensus on that as well?
So HR moved forward with advertising and hiring for 10.
Yes.
And then also the advertising and hiring for an additional math or reading specialist, whatever Dr. Williford and Teaching and Learning determine what the team needs.
Question?
Procedural question. Do we have to take a formal vote to authorize the change in the budget before we even authorize the hiring of those positions?
I guess if you wanted to be technical, you could, just for the record. But if you gave your consensus, then we know that the board has said, yes, we can do it, and we've got the funding, so it doesn't require an additional appropriation. But if the board wants to, if you're more comfortable saying to staff, we'll take a vote in 2 weeks, saying, yes, add 10 FTEs to the budget, then, I mean, that would just make it more official.
I would feel more comfortable about going that route.
But still giving consensus tonight that they can at least move forward tonight, or would
Just-
you?
To advertise.
Right, because what they need to do is advertise now.
Pardon me? I was gonna say we could vote on the 20th, but if you wanted to vote now, too, we could do
Okay.
that.
That'd be great.
Well, or we could consensus now and vote on the 20th when we typically do our formal votes.
I wouldn't feel comfortable with that.
You'd rather
I'd
vote?
rather vote now if we're gonna do it.
Are we good with that? Okay.
Warren,
so-
what do you think? I mean, you're our sage.
I love those, right?
Well, I mean, does it, as your experience as a superintendent, would it be better to?
I understand, I really understand what you're saying in the discomfort, because you don't want to be technically incorrect if they're overspending something, so I can't see any harm in it.
All right.
Can
may I
you?
ca-
I can.
May I call then for a motion?
So moved.
Is it seconded? It's been moved and seconded that we approve the recommended budget that supports the hiring of the 8 with our own funding, the 2 with the additional funding, and the 1 math or reading specialist at Booker T, with the money as outlined through Dr. Thornton tonight. Any discussion? Questions? All in favor?
It might,
Oop,
do you think it might be a roll call vote? What do you think?
sorry.
I did.
Do you want to do a roll call, Janelle? Okay. Aye.
Dr. Gabriel?
Aye.
Reverend Haywood?
Aye.
Mr. Jordan?
Aye.
Dr. Robbins?
Aye?
Dr. Stewart?
Aye.
Dr. Thornton, thanks. Anything else?
Thank you. No, ma'am, that's it.
Break.
And I'll have for you at the business meeting, our status in terms of closing out the fiscal year. I can tell you that we'll close out in a very strong position. For the most part, we'll close out pretty much breaking even without having to use the planned fund balance. But I'll give you more detail and narrative around that.
Great.
So
As a
we're,
request for the future, you know we're starting off this year in the hole. Look forward to
Yes.
hearing how much we're in the hole, so as we begin our budget chat, we know how far in the hole
And then
we
a
are.
in the hole in the sense that we've got one-time revenues. Yes.
Good, thank you.
All right.
Item 2.08, community engagement. I know we're running a bit over at 6:05. Are people willing to go on until 6:30 for us to conclude our agenda?
Yes.
Okay, we will call it at 6:30, which means Elizabeth Mather, Karen Tanner, and then Dr. King, any introduction? 2.08?
2.08, community engagement will consist of an update on NPS logo discussion and branding process that's related to the strategic plan implementation. Ms. Mather?
Yes. Good evening. Thank you for having me here tonight to provide an update on an ongoing effort through our strategic plan to affirm the branding and the brand promise for Norfolk Public Schools and our marketing strategies. As you know, the strategic plan includes multiple references to branding and marketing for Norfolk Public Schools. And on the first 2 slides, I just provided a reference for a reminder. These are year 1 and 2 plans. So as we go through and just talk about the timeline, you'll see you've already had updates on what we've been doing for the first year in this effort, but this is just a refresher. So the key questions, of course, that we have been asking ourselves as we've moved forward is how can we inspire our fellow community members to share our vision and help us fulfill our promise? And we know that we're defined by multiple measures. How can we effectively communicate the value we bring to our community? So the board, I believe, has had the branding and marketing training through the Virginia School Boards Association, which is very excellent training that they provide. And they did come down also and provide it to our communications focus group, our communications advisory team too. But just as a reminder on the terminology, the branding is our promise. That is our mission, vision, what we are promising to our community. Marketing is the process, the technique which would include, logo, slogan, that sort of thing. So examples of marketing would be advertising, materials, logos and slogans, and branding is our culture and our vision, our message and actions. And of course, this aligns with what you learned from the VSBA, that branding is not about spin or the new logo itself. Those are tools that we may use. So the process of developing the brand for Norfolk Public Schools is aligned precisely with our strategic plan. And of course, we don't need to go over that in detail, but I did include it just because we can't not include it when you talk about what our brand promise is. And so our beliefs underlie our brand promise, our parameters, and our mission and vision. Marketing, multiple tactics have been employed already and are contained in the action plans associated with the items in the strategic plan. Educating the community about our promise, our beliefs, parameters, mission, vision, and we employed multiple strategies that you've heard about over time for that. And the process began to develop a new symbol to reflect our community's vision for our school division as the cornerstone of a proudly diverse community. So the process for that was that we worked with 2 local designers who have been partners with us and with the Norfolk Education Foundation over time to assist us with marketing tactics and strategies. They produced multiple drafts of a potential new symbol for Norfolk Public Schools. We vetted that with our community focus group, the superintendent's cabinet and the communications team, and the clear choice of them was a cornerstone symbol that showed ultimately the aspiration for our students.
Elizabeth, what are the number 3 and 4 up there? What does that represent?
The designer provided, I think, about 6 versions of this exact same thing. And these included the symbols within the boxes that the collaborative process identified as probably the best representatives of 21st century learning and the things that we're going for in our mission statement. And I believe at a prior meeting, you all saw multiple items.
What's the purpose of the 3 different colors in the Norfolk Public Schools?
It was a design look to freshen our look, to give us some more current colors. But it is definitely not something that we have to be wrapped around. We want the process from here will be that if the board has consensus around the concept and moving forward with the logo, we will be tweaking that design. Colors certainly can be discussed.
All right, so tonight your expected action board is consensus regarding the logo. Is there any other action that we haven't yet seen that we need to take further into the presentation?
No.
So I guess let's hold our questions if we could till the end of the presentation, then we can come back to the logo.
And that is.
Okay, just wanted to be very clear.
Of the 4 that were up there, are we choosing one of them, or is there one that the group was really in favor of?
Thank you for asking that question. Actually, I should clarify. When we ask designers to produce items like this, we ask them for horizontal and vertical versions so that we can use them in multiple applications.
Oh, okay.
Right. And so, I'm sorry, I should have said that. These, the top and the bottom represent just the same version. They're just horizontal and vertical.
Any questions?
When I originally was given these, I chose one item, the pie sign, as the only thing that I wanted to be in the 4 squares. I'm assuming that the hope is to use this for beginning of the school information. I was to begin having this reflected in a few weeks. I'm assuming that's why we're being asked to decide this now. I would want the symbols to be something that each of us could easily say what they represent. And I just favored the pi sign. I certainly would leave it up to you to make a decision on what shows up best.
The pi sign was well liked by
Yeah,
the focus.
that's the only real editorial comment I can make, probably because I don't know what the rest of them mean, but I knew what that meant, and I would like to have it there personally, because I think it represents an emphasis.
No, signal on those.
Yes, sir.
Are they trying to get equal MC squared? Is that what
Yes,
they're trying to
so
do?
the book represents literacy. The student represents, obviously a student, and the tablet represents technology.
I saw that, and I wanted to have that with my sign.
And that was a tweak, actually, we had from the focus group. Originally, it was represented as something that looked a little more like a computer, but of course, when we talk about technology moving forward.
So are you gonna use 4 different cornerstones, or are you gonna pick one of the 4 and that's it? Because each cornerstone has 4 different icons.
Are you referring to,
Like, one has a sigma, one has the pi, one has a chart.
the pi has been the favorite, and that is the one that we would prefer to go with.
Okay, so bottom left, number
Yes.
3 is where you're preferring.
Then you would see, like I said, horizontal and vertical versions of that. And you may even see, depending on, the application, you might see a black and white version if we have various print projects that require black and white. At this point, the process would be that if we endorse this direction, the designer would go back and work on it to create all of the iterations of it that we need for our applications.
I would request 2 things, just a single sentence about each of the symbols, so that I can remember it when I'm standing in front of people.
That's a great
And
suggestion.
the second thing is, if we're going to do this, we need to tie it to something special like the beginning of school. I don't know if we do that.
That's why we're here.
Will those
Great
colors
time for that.
change, those colors will be able to change, or are they integral to the design?
The colors are certainly flexible. We had positive reaction to these colors so far. But that's, beauty is always in the eye of the beholder, so certainly open for more input on that.
Anyone got a question?
Well, if you want input. I like straight lines, I like corners. The 3 colors are, the Norfolk Public Schools in 3 different colors is distracting to the eye. I would recommend that it be all the same color. I like in the top left-hand one, the cornerstone of a proudly diverse community is more bold and larger and stands out more than in the others.
Noel?
But that's feedback.
Sorry, I don't mean to talk over you.
No, that's
Go ahead, Noel.
I actually agree with that. I think that the light blue is going to be difficult to see on white background. So when we're doing our letterheads and whatnot, I think that the darker colors, contrasting colors are going to be easier for the paper.
Yeah, we have those.
Yes. It's about 30.
From the.
Yes, cross-section. It included internal stakeholders as well.
And they chose those 3 colors.
They chose the basic logo design and reacted well to the colors. The designer presented it to us in these versions and we reacted. But the colors are very flexible, so we can look at that again. And being able to read it and see it is very important.
Yeah, Dr. King?
In my view, this should consist of an update on what has transpired thus far, because as Matter, I think you mentioned that you had a group of stakeholders that were involved in the discussions and process, and this brings the board up to date on where we are with it. In my view, unless there's some sense of urgency around it, I don't think I hear that. I'd like to for them to have an opportunity to go away and review, and they can ask questions and talk about what the next steps would be instead. I don't think we're asking for any action tonight. This is just an update on where we are with that. Am I right?
And I think what we can do is just provide feedback Brad, you had very good feedback, because when it comes to visuals, we need to make sure that the font size is large enough that everybody can read from whatever distance. Because think about it up here on the screen right now, if we're going to see it, we need to make sure we can read it from this distance. So that's the kind of thing that I'm sure Elizabeth and her team will test, along with its reproductive capabilities, its digital look and feel, and so on. So,
My only reaction to that is, I would want you to have the ability to use it strategically in the printing of any information for the company.
I guess if we're going to consider a timeline, that would be it. But I don't want to rush the board in this, because of course the board needs to play a vital role in this piece, and there are ways, in my view, Mr. Team terms different, that we can phase in whatever the branding piece or logo might be as we complete this amount of items that we have on letterhead, that kind of thing. As we do that, and as we bring in new business cards, we can begin to replace it with the new, once we get to the point. So in that mindset of level of thought, I think we can kind of take a little time for you to review it.
Whatever you choose. What I hope is that you have, the first time we use it, that we have some reason for saying we're using this, and that's why we use it. With the 4 symbols and whatever, and it could be on September 17th, Constitution Day, or October 1st, whatever fits in with a good kickoff time.
all right, so I recommend that if anybody on the board has comments, to provide them to Elizabeth as feedback. And then, Elizabeth, do you want to come back to us perhaps on the 20th? And we can see if we want to put you back on the agenda there, or in early September for us to make a formal vote as necessary? Does that work?
Absolutely, and I can have tweaks based on.
Okay, great. Any other thoughts or questions before we move on?
Good job.
Just on the logo piece, 61 and a half dozen the other, but on the rest of it, in terms of marketing, the NPS promise, the brand promise, in my mind, I think that's still more critically important right now than the logo. So I'm just having read through the presentation, I still think we have a lot of work to do there. So I guess if I'm understanding the presentation correctly, the new symbol is a piece of doing that.
Yes.
And so I still like to get a sense of where we're going with the NPS promise. I don't know if you all, I know you mentioned focus groups for the logo, but if you've done anything like just surveying, random survey of stakeholders to see if they even recognize any of the brand promise piece. I know we always talk about the cornerstone of a proudly diverse community, but some of these other pieces, the courageous advocacy and what our beliefs are, have you all done any of that yet? Or will you be doing any of that?
But it is in our draft communications plan for the coming year to have surveys about how well this is connecting, so that we then can develop tactics around how to make sure it connects even more firmly.
And those are items that at minimum, on a yearly basis, you revisit anyway.
Right.
In the cycle, as we begin to do that work at a higher level, because even revisiting the beliefs.
Right.
To ensure that that's what we continue to believe.
Right.
Revisiting the mission, vision, and then parameters, all of those things.
Yeah, I know for here, I was just wondering to what extent the community, we've had penetration in the community around this new direction and belief system. Are they really hearing it and owning it, or do we just think that they're hearing it and owning it?
That's right, and after the 1-year rollout of multiple tactics to get the message out there in the community, it is the right time to gauge how far the penetration has happened. And that is part of the plan.
Very good. Any other thoughts, questions? Okay, thank you, Elizabeth. Dr. King, remarks? What do you have for us today?
No additional remarks outside the fact that I did mention earlier that we last week had an opportunity to come together to begin the conversation around analysis of the summative results, and we spent a full day with that to serve as a springboard going into this current school year, also to develop and tweak what I refer to as startups, which would be about 2 full days for staff when they prepare to come back, principals, assistant principals, instruction lead people, so that what we do is linked to the needs of the division. So we're well on our way with that, and look forward to giving the board further updates very soon.
Okay, if we could, let's take a few minutes. I'm going to modify some of the board matters. Warren, would you like to speak about legislative issues?
Yes. It's always good when you're at the end of the agenda and you're in overtime. So if you would take 2 of these items. Yesterday I visited with one of our senators. I have that copy to give to Ms. Banks to begin this year's file. VSBA has been emailing us today saying, please, that's the first call report, please choose this time to visit your national legislators because they're in their homes. The senator last night said, this is a great idea to visit me now when I can listen to you. So the hope is that each of us could take this time to visit our assigned persons. And Dr. Gabriel, please keep the lieutenant governor. I've already visited the senator's replacement, so that's good. Please visit your assigned representative, and I gave 2 for Dr. Houston, if you could get it to him. Sure. So now's the time to visit. Submit the results of that on the 19th. Mrs. Banks has established our breakfast. Dr. Simmons is going to work on enhancing that, and we'll have further reports. But it's the time to visit now. Remember, the purpose of this is that we are establishing relationships with these folks, and we know these are the issues that VSBA say are holdovers from next year. We can predict other issues will come up, but this is just keeping in touch, getting to know them better. They know we're with them. We'll have a breakfast. And by the way, one of the items not on there is OEI anymore. I wonder what that was.
Okay, master milestones.
We had, Dr. Gabriel and I had a 30-minute presentation, and we were prepared to do so. But at this particular time, there's prudence that's coming into this. On the front side of this is a blank. Each of this is for Dr. King, and this is a governance team memo. There's a date to fill in on the front, and I would hope that, Dr. Gabriel, I'm moving quickly because you know why we're in this. If you would put September 20th in the blank on the front, and the reason August 20th. August 20th, correction, August 20th. Hopefully by our next get-together, you could return this. There are 2 items, one from 2 different school board members that would like to add to this list. And at that time, we would need an hour, 60 minutes, to begin to process these items. Again, that won't be the end of it. That's just the kind of the beginning of the beginning. But we would need 60 minutes assigned to it. But first, there are 2 items that our colleagues wish to add to it, and I would hope that you could just go ahead and write them in, because the same questions need to be asked about each of these new items. I understand the item, and if not, call Dr. Gabriel and myself. I support this item for consideration at this time, not for final approval. This is a process. And finally, I imagine these start dates. I asked earlier Dr. Simmons about an anticipated imagination date for Camp Allen, and she wisely said, no, I can't give you that yet, but each of us may have our own opinions about imagination dates on these. So I believe, Dr. Robinson, you were one person that wanted to add an item, number 18. Could we just write that item in now so that, and if everyone would just bring this form back to us, Dr. Gabriel and myself, and we could have time to process it? What is number 18, Dr. Robinson?
I would like to consider moving Madison Alternative School to the Norfolk Technical Center when that gets folded into the CTE program.
So then the 3 questions would be, I understand the proposal, I would support such a proposal, and this would what I imagined. So, and I mean, Ms. Doyle, I believe you had an item also that you wished.
So in 2008, an efficiency study was published on behalf of Norfolk Public Schools, and I recommend that we revisit that to make sure that we have followed up on all those recommendations that were made to see if they were made, and those that weren't, if they're still valid, and if so, should we or should we not? And I think that's a good way for us to say, are we being wise with the money afforded us? Are we being good stewards? And if so, great. If not, how can we improve? And we can do that leading up until the budget cycle. This efficiency study was done, again, it was contracted for in '07, published in '08, and it's my understanding that many divisions in the Commonwealth have had similar studies done. The Board of Education has recommended MGT actually to do this study for others, including the one for us. So this is not the facility study for MGT, this is the efficiency study. So we can share that amongst ourselves, but that was my recommendation that I thought would be helpful for a kickoff
And that would
of
be number
looking into our
19.
budget.
That would be-
Correct.
Now, Ms. Doyle, Dr. Robinson, would it be possible to email Mrs., you got them both? And she, as usual, going to do cleanup. Ms. Banks, would you please now email us the new 19 items so that we could use that to respond to? And if you would please bring this, your responses to this on the 20th, and Dr. Gabriel and I would have a chance to begin preparing. And again, the request that I'm making before I defer to the conclusion of this to Dr. Gabriel is that we have 60 minutes to begin processing these items. I do not think we'll need to process 1 through 6 very much. I do think some of them are easier, but there's time that we need to start talking about some of them. And remember, the hope is that this will enhance budget conversations, which will begin soon, and it will enhance strategic planning conversations, which are ongoing. So bringing these on the 20th or calling one of us, and I'll come pick them up because I think Dr. Gabriel has other things to do, would be important. But I wondered if that request is understood by everyone, and is that cool? Yes, sir. Mr. Jordan, did you have another item? I didn't.
Well, I don't know, I mentioned this last time, and are we looking to, does academic achievement fit as a milestone, or is that something that we tie this back to? I'm still, because we have a lot.
Trying to put all these into pieces.
Yeah, because we have a lot of good things
Remember,
here.
these
but
are items that were board action items that were votes that were taken, some during our time and some preceding us.
Right.
So we're trying to make coherent action items of Norfolk School Board
Okay.
and trying to fit them in a connected way. And I can already see how easily some of these are going to end up fitting together. And I saw the recent redistricting comments and whatever, but these are just items to make sure that we do all the school board has said it's going to do. And it stimulates conversations about connected items and a whole lot of other things. It's just a process to make sure the strategic plan contains that which the Norfolk School Board has voted on for the past 6 years.
It ultimately is what leads towards academic achievement. And this efficiency study, by the way, was endorsed by the board, requested by the board, that the administration at the time administered.
And that was in our, Dr. Gabriel went over that in our first presentation. It was the first item that was prehistory. So Dr. Gabriel, can you clean up this operation?
Well,
Briefly, if you could. Briefly, if you could.
I had to figure out how I was gonna answer that. I'm not at work right now, so, but yes, we are taking a look at the superintendent's survey that was done, the VAST report, the Department of Education report, as well as, there was
Great
one
City
more,
Schools.
the Great City Schools report. But we wanted to try to leave the majority of the academics within the strategic plan. However, as Dr. Stewart and we all know, the strategic plan is a living, breathing document, so whatever modifications we have to make to it so that it is reflective of those very important documents, it can be. But what Dr. Stewart and I wanted to make sure that we emphasize with this particular topic of the master planning milestones are actions that have been taken by the board or by previous boards to make sure that we're either acting upon it, not acting upon it, or putting it in a place where we can see a timeline. But we wanted to have the majority of academics lie within the strategic plan. So with that being said, just going down the topics, I think that they're pretty self-explanatory. Items 1 through 5 are the new schools that we will be building. As you know, Camp Allen, we don't have a date yet, so that date is in the air at this point in time. Did you want to do CTE?
Well, what I'm just gonna do is
Do
say
we-
everyone can read them.
Yeah.
Just answer, put all of your responses. I'll be happy to pick them up and deliver them to Dr. Gabriel in her office. I'm, for trying saving time, Dr. Gabriel, what I'm gonna do is just say, let folks read them, and if they have any questions, call one of us and we'll talk about it.
Works for me. Okay, next is agenda planning. Our next formal board meeting is on August 20th. We meet informally earlier in the afternoon at 2:30. Our next agenda planning meeting is on the 14th, and I've already added that you want an hour at our next work session, Dr. Stewart, to discuss
And the reason for
milestone.
that is if we don't have time to begin processing these items and making them coherent, then I might suggest that we defer this till next year, because we need time to talk about it.
Okay. Anybody have any other comments regarding upcoming agendas? Any
What time's
suggestions?
That meeting start time
2:30 at this point in time.
for the 20th?
Yes.
How about the September 9th?
September 9th?
Was that, or wait a second, no, I'm sorry, I'm confused.
August 20th is our
August
formal.
20th is when we're going to have the extra hour, is that why
No.
we're there at 2:30?
I don't, no, the extra, we're here 2:30 to do the superintendent evaluation development.
Okay.
So then it did not have to do with master milestones? Were you supposing we would do master milestones on the 20th or in September?
No, I was Dr. Robinson, I was thinking it would be September
Yeah.
when we normally have work sessions.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was just confused.
What day? And right now, planned is the caveat, because that's subject to change, as we all know. So any other thoughts or questions regarding, let's talk about first on the 20th, starting at 2:30. Okay, any other thoughts on, that you'd like the agenda planning committee to consider when we meet on the 14th? And if you don't have an answer now, you certainly can email at any kind or call with any thoughts or suggestions.
Start time 20th, 2:30.
Correct.
Thank you.
At this point in time.
Thank you.
Yes, for the September 10th meeting to, if there's not a meeting prior to that, to come back and do this in-depth review on the, I guess by that time, we might even be close to final accreditation status, but at some point, being able to have this discussion that, at least in my view, I don't think we had today.
Right. Okay. We will look into that, absolutely.
Two more points. By that point in time, we should also have our focus and priority school listing, and so we should probably get updated on that as well.
Okay.
And then, I don't know if the board would enjoy a presentation on this, but I know that United for Children did some really great things with PB Young for now almost 2 summers, and their correlation with the summer school retention and how that compares to these particular kids' SOL scores or performance in school. I'd kind of like to see some data on that.
Right, they gave a good presentation last year. I think we just need to ask them when that data will be available so that we can then put them on the agenda. And I'm looking at you, Karen, or Dr. Savigny.
We have a meeting with United for Children tomorrow.
Okay.
Last Thursday, right, tomorrow. And we can certainly ask when they would feel comfortable coming in and doing that, because we expanded to Tidewater Park this summer as well.
Okay. Brad?
I would suggest that you have that during the formal session on of the business meeting. Because it is such a community, it's almost a community engagement process. There's not going to be a lot of discussion, I don't think, as far as what the board needs to do, but I think it's good for the public to be able to see that.
I think it's a great program, but what I'm really looking at getting is what they're doing in the classrooms over the summer. Is it correlating to increased academic achievement? So
And
that's the
beyond-
only thing that
Yeah, and to be honest, our informals are streamed, our formals are not, and our formals aren't posted. So I think the better audience, frankly, at this point, is the informal. But we can talk about that as to what the best place is at the next
I'm just
meeting.
making a suggestion.
Yeah.
You know, you guys can do with it what you want. That's just
But I agree, we should
that's
make
my
it as
opinion.
broadly as possible. So Dr. Savigny, if you could just
I'm
let us
not
know.
in that position anymore.
I'll ask tomorrow.
I mean, you all there was one presentation that you all did this summer, right? So one of the things we just do is at least get that presentation and start from there.
We just may not have had time yet to go back and correlate, because that data has to student to go back and look at where they were at the beginning of the year. And so I just don't know where we are in that process yet, so I can't commit to a date yet.
We're passing out something, so I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, early, leading into the program, there was an introductory presentation. Yeah, that's what it was, that really took a look at P.B. Young from the start of the program, where students were, and then where students were after the program. And it followed those students throughout the school year last year, up until a certain point, to work to determine the long-term, short-term impact, long-term impact as they move forward. That we do have. Now, what it would not include would be this current summer's impact. And we could talk about what the ingredients were and that kind of thing, but as far as the outcomes, those might not be ready in terms of the pre and the post yet. But yeah, that's being collected, yes.
Any other thoughts for agenda? And again, you can certainly email or call with any other suggestions along the way. Okay, anything else for the greater good before we wrap up for the evening? Do I hear a motion?
Move to adjourn.
Okay, it's been
Second.
moved. Do we second? All in favor?
Aye.
Have a good evening, everybody.